Now, as the focus continues to be on early childhood development, the Bana Early Childhood Development Leadership Summit hosted by the Basic Education Department in partnership with business leadership is looking at some of the ways of addressing critical issues facing the sector. And the summit convened about 150 senior leaders from government, private sector, donor organizations, among others. So, does this take the country a step closer towards ensuring universal access for all children in the country, and especially ensuring that all children are in some form of early childhood development? Let's now speak to Professor Eric Atmore from the Center for Early Childhood Development, who's joining us this evening. Good evening to you, Prof, and thank you so much for your time. So yesterday, in his opening address, President Cyril Ramaphosa admitted that government has made a mistake and should have started with early childhood development 30 years ago. What's your reaction to that?
I think we welcome the President's statement yesterday, and he spoke for 20 minutes, which is unprecedented. The last president to speak for that length of time on early childhood development was the late President Mandela, almost more than 20 years ago. So we welcome his speech, his focus, and we welcome what he said. The real proof will be in the delivery. You know, it's all very well standing up in front of an audience and making promises, but he's going to have to deliver. And civil society and the non-profit early childhood development activists around the country will be holding him to exactly what he said. But we welcome his thoughts, we welcome his apology. Essentially, he apologized that they should have done this 30 years ago, but we're right behind him on this.
When you look at some of the outcomes, as per the statement that was released by the Basic Education Department, you look at a strengthening of public-private partnership as well as a scaling ECD infrastructure investment. One wonders, though, what role would you say the private sector needs to play to address some of the urgent issues around ECD?
The private sector has historically played a significant role, and by private sector, I don't only mean business and corporate social investment programs, but also the various foundations and trusts and funds that have invested very heavily in early childhood development. The infrastructure that you speak about is a huge problem for most reasons that ECD centers cannot get registered is because of the basic infrastructure. And without having that registration compliance, the center cannot operate legally, first of all. And secondly, they cannot access the subsidy, which the finance minister has just increased to 24 Rand per qualifying child per day. So we've got huge problems at a community level in early childhood development, of which infrastructure is one, lack of a teacher training plan is another, shockingly slow and low salaries and wages, and in some cases no remuneration at all. So it's a sector with huge problems, and we've got almost 200,000 absolutely phenomenal women providing care and early education to our children, and it behoves government to back them and the private sector as far as they can.
And I mean, this is very critical, especially when you think about how ECD is the foundation, literally the foundation. And one then looks at, some statistics, for example, suggesting that around or even over 1.3 million children are not enrolled in any form of early childhood development program. And I wonder, in your view, why is this not being addressed 30 years on, that we still sit with such a problem?
I think that the main reason why early childhood development has not been addressed is that there hasn't been the political will to meet the needs of young children. As a country, we've signed the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. We've signed the African Charter on the Well-being of Children. We've got wonderful policies and plans. The National Development Plan talks about early childhood development. But where we've fallen down has been on implementation. Our implementation has been shockingly poor, and the budget allocation has been far too low. We were stuck on a 17 Rand per child per day subsidy for 6 years. And now it's been increased to 24 Rand nominally, but in reality, that has less purchasing power than the 17 Rand of 6 years ago. So the situation is in a dire situation, and it's our children that are suffering. And I'm glad that the president has stepped up and has made a public commitment, and we will hold him to it.
And especially because you look at, some of the outcomes, they're expanding the workforce and looking at the training for more ECD practitioners. And one critical aspect is also the adoption of the 2030 Bana roadmap. If this is not realized, what's at stake?
Well, what's at stake is that the whole sector will collapse. The Pele roadmap itself is not perfect. It's got huge flaws. For many of those centers that are getting registration at the bronze level, it's actually meaningless because there's no subsidy attached to it. So I called it a data gathering exercise rather than an injection of funding. And I would urge the president and the department, those centers that you register at a bronze level, provide them with the subsidy as well. These are the poorest of the poor. These are the ECD centers that need the subsidy the most, but they're being denied it because of factors way beyond their control. It's infrastructure, it's municipal regulations, it's poverty, it's hunger, it's malnutrition. All these things mitigate against early childhood development in our country.
Prof, thank you so much for your time. Let's see then, what becomes of this particular summit and if things will change speedily. I appreciate your time this evening. That was Professor Atmore from the Center for Early Childhood Development.